Now we cookin'. Hello everybody, it's me, Sci-Fi, and I am back with another weapon review. And this one I have been very excited about for the past couple of weeks, actually. And it's on a weapon I have an interesting relationship, and that is the Basmu. Now, the Basmu is a Mastery Rank 11 Sentient rifle that can be found in two ways. One was through the recent event Gargoyle's Cry, and the other is through the Knights of Navarus event at the Necrolisk. And the Basmu has two different instances of damage. The first is on the bolts themselves, which do electric damage, and is also on the AoEs that the bolts produce when they hit a target, which do primarily heat damage. The Basmu also has an alt fire that does primarily electric damage as well that can chain between 5 targets, with each chain dealing 50% less damage than the initial hit. And lastly, whenever the Basmu runs out of ammo in the primary fire or the secondary fire, it will emit 3 pulses that leech health from enemies that are nearby. These pulses deal true damage, but it's not enough to make it a reliable form of DPS, and is mainly used as a method of healing. Now, because of the different damage states that this weapon has, we can get pretty wonky with the types of damage that we want to slap onto this weapon. You can go primarily with Corrosive Heat, which is what I'll be showing you in this video, but I've also found that other damage types like Corrosive and Gas work as well, because the bolts will provide the armor strip from the Corrosive procs, and then the AoEs will proc Gas. Now, when it comes to how we want to build the Basmu, we want to build it around crits, as per usual, because the crit multiplier of the Basmu is pretty decent at 2x, especially with its alt fire being 4.8x. And as I said before, Corrosive Heat is going to be the best damage type for this weapon, but it's also very interesting. Because as I mentioned in one of my previous videos on the Euphona Prime, I talked about how certain damage types have extra damage through armor. And because of the new Archon shards, the green shards for the corrosive stacks, we can reach a 99% armor strip on this weapon. Now, you might think that's really bad for level cap, but on lower levels of gameplay, at least up until about level 1000 or so, it works just fine. Because the extra damage through the armor will apply to the corrosive damage, meaning that you technically get more damage on this weapon using a partial strip instead of a full strip on the enemy. Now, this obviously depends on the enemy itself and what they're resistant to, but most of the time, this does work. As you can see, I have two different limbos here. One with one Tau shard for the corrosive stacks, and one with two green shards for the corrosive stacks. Now, the builds on them are also very similar, having very similar Rift Torrent modifiers that are, although they are different, they are negligible at best. Now, here I am not using a Riven as well, because I want to show that you don't need a Riven to make this weapon work. And as you can see here, the damage between the partial strip and the full strip variants aren't too significant in this case. But it's still cool to know that you don't really lose too much damage between having the full strip and the partial strip. Now, as I said before, this only works up to a certain level, at which point, if you decide to use this in a level cap, you're going to want to go for the full strip instead. For the actual gameplay that is coming up next, I am going to be using a Riven, specifically this build here, so just know that while you're watching this. So here's the Basmu in general gameplay against normal enemies. Here it is against a few Eximus units. And then here's me using it against some Acolytes. So I think it goes without saying from this footage here that the Basmu is a very good and overall highly underrated rifle that I think you should really try. Now, it isn't perfect, obviously. It is mostly a single target weapon, and we're in the AoE meta, you know? But if you want like a good alternative that can easily curb stomp some enemies on Steel Path, then this is a very good choice. Now, getting a hold of it is probably going to be the most annoying aspect of it if you don't own it already. But if you do decide to use this thing, I think you're going to have a good time. Anyway, that's been me, Sci-Fi, showing you the mighty Basmu, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. See you next time.